Hello everyone, it's Eric with a new ranking video, perhaps the biggest one to date. We are ranking every Animation vs. Anything rap battle. Animation vs. Anything, or AVA, has been around for 6 years, and has become one of the most prominent rap battle series on YouTube. Eddiefrb, I'll just call him Eddie for the rest of this, has spent years honing the craft of rap battles, and has grown AVA to a quality over quantity series, and one of the best series in the entire rap battle community. With around 6 battles coming out each year for the last 3 years, Eddie's worked to make sure each one was worth the wait. With impressive production, strong characterization, and sonically appealing writing, the consistent output of AVA has helped it gain an impressive following for a very niche type of video, which will only expand with time. That said, this success did not immediately start up with the first AVA, and in this ranking, we're looking at the full history of a series. We will see where Eddie started over 6 years ago for this series only, because he did make battles before this. But anyway, we'll see where he started with this and where he is now, and I'll try to analyze that evolution to the best of my ability. The only quick caveats here are that I am including everything from chapters 1 and 2, including the reanimated battle. And as always, this is just my personal thoughts, and this is a very, very difficult list to make. Without a doubt the hardest to order so far, and that's going to be part of the fun. Let's begin. Number 30, Calvin and Hobbes vs. Gumball and Darwin. The first AVA is nearly 6 years old, and many aspects of it definitely feel like a first battle of a series kind of thing, which makes sense. I know Gumball pretty well, and I have a little knowledge of Calvin and Hobbes, but these earlier battles, I don't think characterization and references are particularly deep, so prior knowledge is not too important. There isn't much that's awful about it, but ultimately it's just more amateur than the modern ones. Similar to a lot of other older battles, I'll touch on this a lot, the video is pretty awkward, the battle goes by very fast with few interesting schemes or flow switches, the performances are very average, and the writing is kind of basic. The reason this one is the weakest is because each of those aspects I just said are worse than every other early AVA, and thus every AVA. The video's art is the weakest of any AVA battle, and most of the AMV is just clips with a jerky camera movement every once in a while, so visually it is as unappealing as these battles get. The battle is very fast with an up-tempo beat, but not only is it my least favorite of these earlier beats, it feels longer than most of the older battles, and the lack of variety in the writing kinda means I'm checked out by the end. For performances, there's not much to compliment about them next to the very well-directed ones from modern battles. The casting itself is Calvin and Hobbes are alright, but Eric the Audible, and to a slightly lesser extent, Eddie, as Gumball and Darwin respectively, are very strange. Their voices are too deep and I struggle to hear the actual characters as opposed to the rappers. For the actual punchlines, you have "That's Richard" and "Washed up by our Watterson flow." Clearly not the peak of Animation vs. Anything writing, and these are among my least favorite jokes in the series. Obviously, the critiques I'm giving this 6-year-old battle are probably not going to help Eddie improve. He's already gone a very long way from here, but hopefully some general critiques here, such as don't keep the same flow throughout the whole thing, or cast VAs that sound like the character or at least convincing in the role, and so on, will help some aspiring creator. This is more than fine for what it is, but it is my least favorite battle in the series. Number 29 is Poochie vs. Parappa the Rapper. For a long time I would call this my least favorite, that's because I had not seen Calvin honestly, but this makes sense as a lowest as well because it was written in 2016. That's even longer ago than the first battle came out. I don't care much about Parappa, but I know Poochie well, and ultimately, this one shows its age even more than last place. Some lines in this are actually very fun, such as "I'll make you cry when I cut up Master Onion," and "Let me shows your creator learn to always recycle," which is a Poochie reference by the way for those who don't know. Other things here are lower points than Gumball vs. Calvin could reach. Rhyming "Fireworks Factory" with "unsatisfactory" is probably the worst rhyme in the whole series. Another thing is that the video has a weird thing where Parappa gameplay is being shown, and Poochie says, "You rappin' awful," but the actual gameplay has them rapping good, so they had to edit an arrow in that was pointing to the word awful, and I'm curious as to how they had no awful gameplay. That's more of a nitpick, but that just sticks with me for some reason, I don't know. There are other things I find fun here. The existence of a Poochie battle is great, and I don't think Eddie would use him today because he's not a very major character, so I'm super happy this exists. Masha was a solid cast, even though he doesn't really sound like Homer Simpson, but he has the right dopey but cool energy. And ultimately, this battle escaped last place by being shorter than the last one, meaning it doesn't drag as much. That's really the main reason why. If it did, this would be at the bottom. But still, it is a solidly fun time. Number 28, Detective Pikachu vs. Kyoko Kirigiri. To me, this encapsulates the early Eddie battles for most of the first chapter. It's fine, but not super noteworthy performances rapping over some very catchy beat, but only saying some okay rhymes and an amateur video. Like with the early grid lines, I'm going to keep this segment a bit shorter and other early ones shorter. I don't know much about these characters, so I've pretty much said all I need to. Sweetly and Garbage Gothic do a good job, but they're mostly just kind of reading the lines without a lot of specific direction. The video is probably a bit below average for the earlier battles, and the beat is right around average. This one doesn't have any super standout elements, and that is why it ranks below most others. Number 27, Peridot vs. the Flatwoods Monster. It's kind of a shame this can't be a bit higher because while some aspects like the flow are not any better than early battles, it feels like some stuff had a lot of effort put in. Ozia gives a very unique performance as Peridot. She doesn't usually stray super far from her regular kind of voice, but it pays off here with a solid impression and role. The editing on this side is also pretty fantastic. The AMV by Eddiefrb is much more interesting and dynamic than that Gumball AMV. Another aspect I like is how intense the beat gets and the Flatwoods performance as well in that final verse. There clearly were some ideas here. Unfortunately, some things lose me, like the use of the Flatwoods monster. I don't know much about Steven Universe, but I doubt any viewer knew about this thing. I've never heard of it, and it seems like a few tiers below Mothman or Jersey Devil. It's never really explained why he's like that either. I don't really know anything about him from watching the battle. Maybe they say and I just don't remember, but either way, his side is more flawed. It is amateur art and weaker editing clashing a bit with that other half of the video, and the writing features an opening scheme that rhymes evidence with evidence. That does not work for me. And the closer's writing and delivery feel very anticlimactic after the crazy aggressive build-up for the rest of it. There's merit here, but it's also pretty forgettable, and enough of it is below average that it lands pretty near the bottom. Number 26, All of the Other Reindeer vs. Snoopy. The closest thing to a bonus battle in the series, this has a very basic video. It's hard to compare to other earlier ones because it's more appealing, but there are a total of 3 moving components, so all in all it kind of evens out. The performances or beat are right there with the others I've said, but I think the writing is a step up. The punches are pretty basic, things like Snoopy being black and white as a joke and calling him Snoop Dogg, and a Tim Burton joke about Olive's uncanny animation, which I'd call a stretch. That said, you have the scheme Doggone It Foxtrotted Back to the Simpsons, seeming frankly a bit ahead of its time. It sounds nice, and it's pretty clever. And I also find Snoopy saying Olive will bring warmth to the world as a Lucy Van Pelt is a much better line than any other I've said so far. With a little tweaking, some of these definitely could have been in much more recent AVAs. Knowing the characters does help me here, but I think this writing is just a lot better than those I've said so far. Not every line hits, but more do than average, and even if it's a rather simple battle with less ambition than Peridot, it's enjoyable and shows that even 5 years ago Eddie was starting to cook. 25 is Musume vs. Inkling. High highs and low lows in this one. I know next to nothing about these characters outside of Smash Bros, and I've never heard of the Musume girl. And her parts are definitely weaker. I think her first verse drags really hard, because it seems like it reaches a good finishing point, and then there's 4 more lines. Ozia does fine, but the performance is just kind of an existing one, with ad lines like, "You put on a shonen," with more uninteresting flow and weird-looking AMV. Inkling's also not perfect. The second verse is short but bad, with the closer being extremely weak. The line, "Even the gamepad was a more effective controller," is obviously basic, but it's also delivered weirdly and straight up not my thing. Fortunately, Inkling's first verse offers a very strong start that helps the placement a lot. Garbage Gothic is a great performance here, and I think the voice effect was actually a very fantastic touch. It never takes away, and it also seems like it would have been incomplete without it. So that's great. What I like most here is the whole intact, in-rap, this match scheme. It's not as polished as other modern rhyme schemes, but it's a huge step up from the other boring ones, and the intense parts of the beat and the gorgeous shot, they really aid this scheme. It really ropes me in, and because of how hooked I am at this part, I never lose that hype even throughout the rest of the battle being kinda eh. Some aspects of this are not any better than the battles below it, but the best stuff holds up quite well. And it's all around a decent experience. Number 24, Roger Rabbit vs. Max. Similar to Eddie, I've seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but know little about Sam and Max. This battle is mostly just Roger Rabbit references, but some of these hit very well. As expecting, the battle not super focused on characterization, Max has most of the Roger Rabbit references because he's dissing the opponent more than flexing, and things like, "I don't want to have to shoot the battle 23 times, that's a good diss against an event in the movie, and also a fun way to start it, and the slapstick line is quite clever. The Roger Rabbit side is less interesting writing. I mean, the closer is, "I'd be more entertained watching Max and Ruby," clearly not a ton of innovation there. That said, I think Freshie Canal does a great job, and there are more interesting flows here with some well-placed pauses for ad-libs and breathing room, and this gets an edge over Inkling mostly for having the lines I understand a lot more, plus the more fun vibe. That said, we still haven't reached the videos where everything comes together, particularly visuals here, are just not there yet. Number 23, Alastor vs. Siren Head. Not much to say here, but like Max or Inkling, the Alastor side is very clearly the superior here. Siren Head is not something I know much about, and I don't think I want to. The performance is alright-ish, but it's held back by a very hard-to-understand voice effect. It doesn't sound good, and I don't remember a single thing Siren Head said in the battle. The Alastor side is stronger because he seems like a much more interesting character. I don't know Vizzy-Pop very well, but the performance is really cool, and it sounds excellent, especially next to the Siren Head effect. Alastor's writing is also quite fun. The line, "Those bars are torturous, not even something I'd endorse," seems like a nice in-character moment, and I find it very funny. The scheme starting with, "I'm the big shot eldritch horror," is also one of the more interesting and creative bits of writing from an early AVA. Not the best scheme ever, but a step up. One other criticism I have is that the beat goes really hard right when the battle ends, which is a tad frustrating. I wish the strongest parts of the beat were used during the actual battle. That said, half of this battle is probably the best half of any I've discussed so far, and that counts for something. Number 22 is Spinel vs. Bendy, the first Chapter 2 battle on the list. In terms of production, a clear step up from most Chapter 1 battles, as most modern battles are. This one has better editing, some solid animation, and a cleaner audio. I don't have too much to say on these production aspects because they're clearly better than the last few battles I discussed, but they're pretty below average in the Chapter 2 scheme of things. I mentioned this beat before in the gridline ranking, saying I liked it here but not there due to how intense it is and better mixed, and that still stands. I just wanted to mention that parallel. And since production's good, you may wonder how this still ranked below every other Chapter 2 battle and some Chapter 1s. Well, I find rhyme schemes to be an issue here. Chapter 2 does not have any boring or repetitive flow, but this battle is the least successful in the rhyme schemes compared to the others. Plenty is solid, but schemes like, "I took over the entirety of Earth to start a fire." That's obviously exaggerated, but you get the gist. They're kind of awkward, and the deliveries don't really help. I think they weren't really written, particularly on the Spinel side, with the character's voice in mind. Black Roses does a good job in terms of replicating the voice. The voice acting is strong, but she definitely struggled with schemes like that one and the "sick bars that I spit onto this imposter" or whatever. Jenny No Mercy is more effective as Bendy, but they do still have to say, "get redeemed in roughly 90 minutes." The 90 minutes thing is a little weird. In terms of lines themselves, they are okay. I don't know either character well, Though after this, I feel like I know a lot more about Steven Universe than Bendy. The battle seems to be a bit more accessible for that side, frankly. But the main lines I remember are kind of obvious and hypocritical, like Spinel saying Bendy is a toxic fan base, or they're just too basic, like it must be very hard to not exist in your own game, unless there's just something there I don't get. That is possible. But the one other kind of minor issue I have is how the beat gets super low-key for the last 4 bars, and every time the outro starts, I'm always shocked because it seems like it's no way that's the ending to a battle. It just doesn't feel as conclusive as maybe Eddie thought it did, but maybe that's just me. That's a very possible one. But all in all, I know I complained a lot, but I just don't think any of these good aspects are really enough to help explain why it's below other Chapter 2 battles, or why it's above the Chapter 1 ones, because it's a very clear step up from everything I've said so far, but it's also a pretty clear step down from everything above it. It's good, there's just a lot I don't enjoy that much. I think the start of Chapter 2 showed greater strides in production than writing overall, but writing is certainly very, very hard to master. So it's understandable that this 3-year-old project has a few shortcomings in that regard, as Eddie began branching out into more ambitious styles. Number 21. Ruby Rose versus the Mandalorian. This battle oozes passion, and it feels massive, especially because it's really long. The whole battle is just over 3 minutes, which for a rap battle is lengthy. But as expected with a project of this length, there's lots of ideas thrown in, and some of them work, but some don't. This battle is well over 3 years old at this point. In fact, probably 3 years and 2 months, so maybe not by that much, but still. And that does show, because while the project's still very good, there are plenty of things I dislike that feel like the sort of thing Eddie would not let slide today. Let's start with visuals. The Ruby Rose side is done with motion capture, and while certainly better than ERB's Godzilla motion capture, it definitely doesn't hold up as well as some of the cleaner traditional art and animation in other AVAs. Some arm movements are particularly a little weird in how they translate from the actual movements to the animation. On the Mando side, you have gorgeous art, and plenty of good-looking editing and transitions, but it's very obvious that different editors did different parts. Some transitions are just kind of the camera turning 90 degrees and a tiny Mando popping out from behind another Mando, and they look more basic than the really good Adroit Whiz editing, and that's a little jarring as a result. Then you have tons of stills and 3D models all throughout appearing at different moments. They mostly look good, but the video is a little scattered and inconsistent. All in all, it is among the weakest visuals in Chapter 2 overall. The other aspect that had a lot of ideas thrown in is writing. You have tons of disses and rhyme schemes showing drastic improvement over most of Chapter 1. The individual punches have varying degrees of success. I don't know anything about RWBY, if you even call it that. I know they say Ruby in the battle at one point, but that doesn't make sense to me because Ruby is a U in it. Moving on, I know Star Wars pretty well, but not the Mandalorian itself. Still, I can easily pick up on lines like, he charges in and loses his head like Jango Fett. That's great. Love that. This battle also has lots of lines with puns that reference Ruby's name, and those are accessible to those who don't know the source material. I think some of these are very good. In fact, the last one, about the only Rose being at the friends' graves, is a solid and clever closer. But some of the others later on are just kind of too much. It gets a little repetitive with the same kind of puns, and it peaks with all the blood on your hands, you're red like roses. That's just not enough for me. It's too basic, and after many better puns on roses and similar, it's not great. A more nitpicky one, your scythe carries you like a Ruby Goldberg machine, is kind of weird because Rube Goldberg machines require each individual part to work, so if the scythe really carries, then it's not really much of a Rube Goldberg. But that's just kind of a silly thought that popped into my mind when I was rewatching the battle. In terms of rhyme schemes, many are frankly awesome, and while generally not as clean as the newest battles, they're still catchy while packing in decent content. The scheme where Ruby says Ruby Rose 4 times, yeah, that's a little awkward. But what follows, with I spew the most abusive and ruthless flows, is actually a really good way to build off of the first part of the scheme. And at least in the solid lines about the show, The Mandalorian, with your stupid show is Lucasfilm's newest hope, but shows improved a tool for dough like Luke or Snoke. It sounds great, and it offers some relatively simple but very effective disses. I love that. And another good one is in Mando's second verse, where he says she turns around and acts casual of all the casualties, and that scheme continues building with the whole casualty rhyme, and closing with too busy crushing on the resurrected graduate dean. These schemes are very, very good, and they have excellent lines within them to boot. One that does stand out as flawed, though, outside of the Ruby Rose one, is when Mando is saying Mandy, family, pansy, but the transition into the next scheme does not work very well. It goes, you're really a pansy, antsy, in hand-to-hand combat. The line has very stretched syllables to make the rhyme work, and the delivery was not directed well enough to make it sound smooth, so it's one of the more awkward and amateur-sounding lines in all of Chapter 2. As a whole, this battle has several elements of exceptional quality that hold up in 2024, but it is clear that with such a grand battle before Eddie truly found the footing he now has, not all of these elements are as polished or enjoyable as the best parts of the battle. Number 20, Mr. Peanutbutter versus Isabelle. Okay, I initially had this at 22, but after recording and realizing I was watching this at least once a day, I thought, okay, clearly I'm enjoying this one a lot. And despite being at number 20 out of 30, yeah, it's a super fun and replayable battle that holds up surprisingly well. The beat is a big part of that for me. I've said most of the Chapter 1 beats are pretty catchy, but this is my favorite of any battle beat I've discussed so far. It's super vibrant and jazzy, and the most intense parts completely suck me in. There's one moment with a really well done visual transition that shows good knowledge of BoJack Horseman, which I don't have, by the way. And the performance is going really well. The lines are delivered awesomely, providing the fun wordplay. You're a secretary, not secretariat. This whole moment, it's just 2 lines, but it's awesome. That said, the aspects I love about this moment do vary in quality throughout the rest of the battle. Besides the beat, that is, but the visuals first. They're pretty fun. You have lots of cute Isabelle stills from BMB, and some of the strongest editing in Chapter 1. But the editors were still sort of finding their footing, I think, with plenty of portions just being Isabelle still sitting in the front as the background's moving around. And while visually the colors are pleasing and all, it's just not as impressive as anything above it, or the last 2 battles I discussed. The deliveries are tough here, because I think Eric the Audible has very fun energy for his role, and Ivava has a very lovable voice for Isabelle, but unfortunately, most of the battle does fall into the trap of just kind of being VAs saying lines in the voice without a whole lot of variety. This is something that improved in later AVAs, and it does keep this one from rising even higher in the rankings. The other thing that keeps this one a bit lower is that some writing is great, but there are long enough periods with weaker lines, and the flow is kind of hit or miss throughout the battle that there is a lack of consistency. It feels like you have the one great bit, and then plenty of other fun lines with great wordplay, such as Animal Crossover Episode and Peanut Butter and Jelly, but it does seem kind of like Winnie the Pooh versus Snorlax, for those who've seen my Shimario ranking, where it's a collection of good lines and moments, but unfortunately some just kind of seem thrown in. Such as the super solid rhyme scheme, your karaoke may have won over Twitter, but on the rung of a spitter, you're just the runt of the litter. It's great, but it is the only crazy rhyme scheme in the whole battle, and unfortunately, the best parts have counterbalances that make this seem a little more disjointed, especially in the last verse. Isabelle's second verse feels very long, and it only has one line I particularly like, and it's the one aided by the beat going more intense. That is, in the end, the only child in your household is you. The rest of the lines are nothing above average at their best, and the pauses and flow do not seem as intentional as those in other verses, or if they are, they just weren't as good an idea. A good example is, this is like your new design, no cap. I find it ironic the birthday dad can't rap. This is an even more egregious one than what follows with, your pilots get as much airtime as Dodo Airlines, which feels like it had too many syllables crammed in. And maybe this was just an issue of the demo not fully translating to the final recording, or some experimenting not really paying off, but I think the last verse is pretty weak. Fortunately, the rest of the battle is super fun and entertaining, and it was enough to outrank some of Chapter 2. Number 19 is Poochie and Pansy versus Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Here's a battle I think actually really holds up, in nearly every aspect. It gets a leg up over some Chapter 2 battles because I find it very memorable, and in this case, it's a good memorable. The only really big pet peeve I have is the line with the word horrible, which is a really bad pun in my opinion. That's all. The rest is good. I don't know Poochie and Pansy, but their parts are alright. I'd like the line slowly ditching your friends while we always stick together, a simple but very solid distant comparison between the shows. But the rest of this side doesn't have that much great writing. Fortunately, the beat is slower and is more digestible than the really fast-going Poochie or Gumball battle, so it's better writing even if the lyrics are not that memorable. Additionally, the video is great. Adroit Wiz provides more fantastic AMV editing, and this is probably the best video in Chapter 1. There's a lot more that stands out as good here, but mostly just on the DHMIS side. I think Poochie and Pansy voices are average performances, but the DHMIS ones are not only excellent impressions, but also have very good deliveries that rise above most other performances I've talked about. The writing is also worthy of superlatives, because there's a lot of creativity on the DHMIS side. The concept of having red guy finish rapping first, then duck guy, and having yellow guy being the only rapper left in the last verse, is a subtle but clever telling of the actual story of the show. The individual lines are similarly creative, and I still remember lines such as, "Have you met the talking clock? 10 years and you'll surely rot, with a pesky B-plot worth getting a diddly squat." It's a great scheme that isn't as out there or awesome as Chapter 2 stuff technically, but it's delivered well and packs in some fun references and disses. This is some of the best Chapter 1 writing for me. Another highlight was when Red Guy shouts out my series, even though he says it sounds really boring. But at least it's a fun reference, even if he's kinda mean to me. All in all, this battle has better performances, visuals, and writing than the others in Chapter 1 I've discussed, and I think it shows the seeds being planted for AVA's current quality. It wasn't a breakout project or anything, but it's fun, pretty impressive, and has few things I dislike. Number 18 is Jack Skellington vs. Sans. I imagine this placement is odd to some, maybe too high for some, maybe too low for others. It's certainly a flawed battle, and it feels much more like Chapter 1 than Chapter 2. It was a Chapter 1 finale, but, it was pretty close to the start of Chapter 2, so you would think it'd be the big transition. But let's discuss some stuff that does fall below that Chapter 2 standard. The performances are the first thing that come to mind. Zawsome as Jack Skellington and Mancha as Sans are both good choices for the voices, but I say that same thing about pretty much every battle on here. The tough thing is that there are some very awkward sounding flows here that seem to be a mix of the VAs not being able to keep up and the writing not being very clean. Here's some examples. The first fast part with Jack sees Zawsome kind of lose his breath near the end. He trips a bit with, "'Cause you're dressed by a goat, that you don't know?" That's an exaggeration, but you get the point. Then the first part of Sans' first verse just sounds really weird, and I can't even describe it. I think it's supposed to be 9 syllables and then a 3-syllable rhyme at the end of each line, but the 9 syllables are all over the place, so drastically different in each individual line, and the meter is so out there for each one, I don't even know how well Mancha's enunciating with them, it just didn't work for me. One more to note is Jack's second verse having the line, "You turn to a sack like Oogie Boogie." You may notice I kind of tripped up on sad sack, and yeah, that's what happens in the actual battle. I think that was more of a writing not being super polished thing. And all in all, while these are kind of small parts of the battle, they are a bit worse than everything after this, and maybe a bit worse than the things that came before it on the ranking. On the note of Jack's second verse, though, there are some very big misses in the actual writing here. The line, "With bars like that, I'm asking, do you wanna have a bad rhyme?" is something I imagine Eddie would never use today. It's just really basic and not especially clever or funny. What is funny is, "I'm killing this beat, you can call it your brother." I can't explain why that line is hilarious apart from it being really basic again, but it's laugh out loud funny to me. So I had a lot to say about things in the battle that kind of fall below the standard, but why did it rank above any 2021 battles? Well, there is a confession in order. This was my first AVA, because it was one of the very few with characters I actually cared about. I know the film Nightmare Before Christmas very well, and Sans memes were funny, I guess. I don't know. I had never played Undertale. But that did stand out at the time at the very least, and I thought the whole battle was pretty awesome and one of the best fan-made rap battles out there. Looking back, many parts of the battle do not match that standard, but plenty do. No rhyme scheme in this is quite as technical as the 2022 or 2023 battles, but some of them, like the whole "Listen Jack, you're a classic but not flawless" section, and "You hoped and you prayed about all the dough you'd make on opening day but nobody came," they sound excellent and worthy of 2021 AVAs, while still offering some solid diss content about Jack's movie performing poorly. I think there's additionally some funny lines in here that were meant to be funny, things like, "Even my costume in Smash is better representation." There's more I could discuss about this, like the video, but that's not really going to justify anything. Simply put, the battle feels more amateur than all that came after it, and some that came before it. But sometimes amateur battles can have a lot of fun writing and be enjoyable. They can have lighter ambitions and still have some charm to them, and this fits that bill. And as a result, it sticks with me more than some of the earlier Chapter 2 battles, and as a result of maybe some nostalgia as well, it ranks a bit higher. Number 17, Yakko Warner vs. Kermit the Frog. This battle is actually kind of similar to Jack vs. Sans. It's full of stuff that does not age the best and feels like it would not have been made this way today, but it was in production for a very long time, so I can kind of understand why that happened. Unlike some other AVAs that are in the works for a really long time, maybe much longer in fact, this one wasn't really cleaned up as it was going, and as a release, some things did seem a bit below standard. When it came out, it was among Eddie's best battles, but it doesn't really hold up next to the battles that came after it. The writing feels like it was made well before the battle's release, with little editing throughout that production. Yakko's whole "in the past, when Jim had passed and Disney asked" scheme isn't really all that great, and pales in comparison to the technical writing in battles that rank above it. Many of the punchlines are also kind of below the current level, like "Muppet Flow Tonight," and especially "You wouldn't even be hip on a Sesame Street." I actually came up with a line very similar to that on my own before this battle dropped, so that's not that good. Even the content is kind of repetitive. The first Yakko verse has that scheme that I don't love, but it is dissing the quality of the Muppets, and at least it's some pretty good content. But the second verse opens saying the same thing for 3 or 4 lines, and there's nothing that interesting wordplay or flow-wise in the second verse. Usually Eddie keeps this sort of thing varied and interesting, but it's kind of like how "I'm killing this beat, you can call it your brother" was dissing something that already had been mentioned. Also, like Jack vs. Sans, there are some weirdly delivered lines that seem like a mix of the rhyme not really working and the VA not quite staying with it. For example, Kermit's final scheme has emphasis on the "ah" syllable, so he says, "So Yakko and all his gaffes should say in the past." And it's just a little too stretched while not sounding that great when delivered by Tibbs. The video also doesn't really stack up against a good amount of battles after it. The PNG editing is very good, if a bit unspectacular, and the puppets are really creative and fun, but many shots of them kind of go out of focus or the movements are a bit too much for the camera, and it does get a little blurry or weird looking. I like the idea, some parts just don't look quite that great. Now, I've said a lot of bad things here, and they probably seem worse than the last few battles I discussed. Maybe they are. However, this is still a very, very fun watch. The beat is really chill but catchy and immediately has me in a good mood every time. For being written before Chapter 2 even officially started, a lot of the writing is still really fun. I like the scheme at the end of Yakko's first verse, with "on the mic you'll be towed" being a very funny line and "your tongue only threatens the flies that you gulp." That part's very good, and even some simple lines like the Jack Black reference are at least chuckle-worthy. Frankly, most lines are solid, even with some weirder deliveries like "I've seen scarier dots in the face of Constantine." They're still good lines because the joke and wordplay are funny, and that has to count for quite a bit. The performances are definitely at least decent. I think Tibbs has a good Kermit impression, but 90% of men can do some sort of Kermit impression, even if it's not that great, and I think there's a chance someone could have done a better job. I don't know for sure, it's not a big deal. The Kermit characterization is kinda boring in general, but Snakebite126's Kyoko for me is the star performance. He has very fun emphasis, and nails characterization in lines like, "Hello, verse." Admittedly, he is held back by that first rhyme scheme just not being a good one to pull off without sounding weird, but still, this is a great Snakebite role. All in all, this is a very simple but catchy battle, with some charm and ambition balancing pretty well in the video, and ultimately, the replay value is great here. There are flaws, but I still love it. Number 16 is Derpy Hooves versus Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway. Another simple battle with some aspects that maybe aren't all that great. I have just as much fun with this one as Kyoko, and maybe even a little more. For context on the characters, I have unfortunately read My Immortal, but it does help me understand the lyrics better with this one. I'm not a My Little Pony fan, but there are plenty of accessible lines. I don't think there's anything especially great about rhyme schemes here. They're all decent, except for the one where Ebony has to say, below me, which is a big stretch for me for below me. The rest is well written, but not super technical or mind-blowing. The individual lines stand out more. I like, your show became like your eyes going two different directions, and especially, how did you get into Hogwarts if you can't even spell? They're super clever and humorous puns, easy to pick up on, and really stick in my mind. These are among my favorite lines in any battle I've discussed so far, and I like them better than probably any individual line in Kyoko vs. Kermit. The performances are also a bit stronger here. There isn't too much characterization for Ebony, but KC was a great cast and sells the rhyme schemes much better than Kermit or Kyoko due to the smoother deliveries. Garbage Gothic as Derpy Hooves is a very fun performance that feels unique amongst her expansive catalog. She seems to be having so much fun with things like, "Our Terra is stronger," and "I do have one letter to hand you, it's an L," which are fun little lines on their own, but heavily aided by the way they are said. The video is well made but unspectacular. There is one very fun visual with a lot of typos on it in reference to the actual story, My Immortal, and that covers just about everything. I like the battle, but I think everything I've said kind of shows that while the project's fun, it's not that special. It feels like a lot of other rap battle creators could have pulled off the same success in nearly every area if they made this same kind of battle. Obviously, it's 3 years old, so maybe back then no one could have. But looking at the project now, it's not really unique to Eddie's style. It earned a decent spot, but everything above this feels more specific to Eddie and more special as a result. Also, this is an April Fool's battle, and I briefly want to note that it doesn't really lean into the April Fool's aspect as much as other April Fool's battles I really like, but that's a very minor thing. Simply, this is a very good battle that's just not up to snuff with most of the stuff made after it. Number 15, Lo-Fi Girl vs. Cassette Girl. This is a decent jump from 16th and the start of the top half. The top half are all excellent projects that I struggled with ordering, but here we go. This is the bottom of the top. It's like the crop of the cream. And I imagine most would not put it at the crop of the cream. It is great production and is certainly a pleasant listen, but I have to admit, I don't really go back to it much. Most aspects are the sort of thing I feel like I'm only inclined to talk about because I'm trying to give a detailed analysis of the battle. But in this one, the video and a lot of lyrics just don't stay in my mind. So the battle rarely pops into my head, and I've watched nearly every other Chapter 2 battle more than this one. When I watch it, the one thing that really sticks out to me is the great beat. It's gorgeous and certainly unique for a rap battle, showing how Eddie is able to bring new types of sound into the rap battle scene effectively. When I watch it, especially during Lo-Fi Girls versus though, I'm mainly just enjoying the beat and the lyrics kind of happen. They're good lyrics, things like Anchor Electronics keeps holding her back and FNF couldn't get this android to blow up, but they're just kind of average animation versus anything lines at this point, and they wouldn't feel that out of place in many Chapter 1 battles. Then you have Lo-Fi making that bread got that lo-fi being a pun I don't really like. I find that to be a bit of a stretch. I don't like that line and the way it rhymes with pillow fights either, but this is just one couplet, and it's the only delivery that Stargirl doesn't really pull off. Cassette Girl has a much more effective writing for me. The performance is awesome, being high energy while still fitting the calmer vibe of the battle. Dahlia is given gorgeous flows to work with, though. Lines like, "Oh, you're telling me your melodies put us both to sleep," and "Donder Don's the mark of Don DeMarco" are not lines I like that much in terms of content, but they sound fantastic and they're rapped perfectly, so they are among my favorite lines in the battle. Just the opening scheme immediately piques my interest. It's the way she says, "Let's kick it back to the 80s, immediately I'm hooked." Adding to this, some of the lines that sound good are also very high tier. I think "The coronavirus left their viewers with no taste" is excellent in terms of wordplay and content, and it's spoken just as well as any of the other great lines I named. So all in all, there are things I love here, but it was harder to talk about, honestly, because for whatever reason, the battle disappears from my mind after I watch it, mostly. This happens sometimes. Most, if not all, great creators have some forgettable projects. I recall for the fight marker ranking, I really struggle to have thoughts on Joker vs. Guy Fawkes, as even though it's fun and well made, it's just not memorable to me. This falls in that same camp for me. Everyone who worked on this did a very good job, but it just doesn't stay in my mind as much as battles that tend to have sillier or more intense vibes. Still a very successful project in what it wanted to do, but maybe what it wanted to do was not really for me. Number 14, Megumin vs. Ralsei. This project is not nearly as unique as Lo-Fi Girl, and there are more obvious flaws here. The biggest involves the visuals on the Megumin side for me. The AMV is overall very pleasant and well done, but the decision to have some fun text with the lyrics popping up, in addition to standard subtitles, is baffling to me. Especially since the first verse is the only one to have standard subtitles. Second Megumin verse doesn't. I think it's a bigger deal than it might seem, because if you're following the fun words, they randomly disappear, and your eyes have to avert to the subtitles really quickly to keep up. The enunciation is very good, so it's not a huge issue of needing subtitles, but when you're kind of distracted by the actual video because you're trying to follow the text, which some people naturally do. I think I naturally just kind of look at subtitles sometimes, and this does kind of mess with me. So I think they should have done standard subtitles the whole time. This is probably the most flawed aspect of any 2023 AVA for me. The battle itself also does have smaller issue with the fact that it just goes by very fast. That was a compliment for Poochie vs. Parappa, because I was happy for it to be over. But in this very catchy and fun battle, I would have liked more. The main issue is that the last two verses are 8 lines each, and they both introduce a second character. So you have the second character say the first line, and around 20 seconds later, that's it. The verse is 2 seconds longer than the disclaimer at the start of the video, for crying out loud. When the characters are talking to each other at this really fast tempo, it feels kind of unnatural. This bothers me more on the Megumin side for whatever reason. I think for Ralsei, it feels like it's longer, even though it's not. I don't know. The Megumin and Union verse flies by very fast. I imagine this was a smaller project, but due to that smaller number of lines combined with the faster tempo, it sort of has the pacing issue of the much earlier battles. It doesn't hit me until the second half, and especially the final verse, but it does leave a bit of a bad taste in my mouth at the end. Fortunately, this is mainly an issue because of how much I love the rest of the project. The beat was custom made, and it is beautiful. It's more conventional than that Lo-Fi Girl beat, but I think it's just as good, and it's an earworm. The writing is overall my favorite in any battle I've said so far too. It's clear that characters were kept in mind, and since they have more personality than Lo-Fi or Cassette Girl, some of the deliveries, like "I can tell your voice actors tried their very best," are hilariously well done. The first 3 verses are very hard to fault in the writing departments, and they show just how clean Eddie's writing has gotten. I think Megumin's first verse has quite a few interesting schemes in it as well, and they are pulled off excellently. The opening with "Bout to bomb this castle down as my target practice ground" being a 5-syllable rhyme, and then "Crimson Demon leaving bleeders bleeding deep crimson" being an infinitely better version of the Don DeMarco line from Cassette Girl for me, are just some examples. And all of them are delivered with such aggression from Azia that seems true to the character based on the document Eddie made about Megumin. So Megumin has excellent lines that are delivered great, and this carries over to Ralsei and Suzy as well. I think Union is the weakest part in this regard because she doesn't really have any good punches, and she's just kinda there. Her inclusion feels less warranted than Suzy. Her personality is not as fun a contrast, and that's kind of unfortunate. So while Timmy does a good performance, she didn't really have that much to work with. The opening couplet in the verse is kind of fun banter, but that's about it. And then it's over. So this battle does kind of stumble as it crosses the finish line, but it's still a blast, and I go back to it quite a bit. Number 13, Light Yagami vs. Monica, clocking in at 3 minutes and 40 seconds. This is definitely the longest battle in the catalog. Eddie told a story here. It's my understanding that when Light writes Monica's name in the battle, his verse goes 40 more seconds, but then Monica's still alive, because her full name is actually Monica.chr, or .character, hence Light's failure being in character. This leads to Light losing confidence and composure, and in the second verse he gets super angry by the end. I find this attention to detail very impressive, and it's aided by an incredible performance from Alex M that nails the different mannerisms of Light Yagami. This is coming from somebody who has not seen Death Note but generally understands the premise. Same goes for DDLC. I know the story and characters well enough, mostly from rap battles. This overarching story is incredibly well done, and there are tons of small details in here that add to the experience. Things like Ryuk dissing both rappers or the time signature change in Monica's verse. These are just some details I learned from the comments section. The visuals are full of fun Easter eggs as well, but it's really the songwriting and script that make this battle stand out. Even as others have tried to pull off similar story concepts, no other project is quite like this. On top of this, many of the conventional positives of rap battles are still present here. The beat is a perfect pick, and the way it's engineered to match the tone of different lines or the intensities, that's very good. It's masterful, frankly. And also, there are good, clever lines here, such as, "I'll take this computer chip and delete it." One flaw I've heard is inconsistent tone with Light, most notable when he says, "Such a chicken, no wonder losers thirst over your thighs," in a super aggressive part of his first verse. But I think the delivery kind of sells that one. I don't think that line's bad. For me, the issue is once the first 3 verses tell the story, the battle kind of loses me. I think the first scheme in the 7-8 time signature sounds very cool, and the way the lines tie into the deaths of the other Doki Doki characters is clever. This is a detail I caught without the comments section, so I'll elaborate. This scheme is all about Misa, who from my understanding loves Light but does not love back. Monica says he tossed her aside, which is what MC does by abandoning Sayori in DDLC the day she dies, tying into that death. Then Monica says Light cried that he wanted Misa, which relates to how MC can confess to loving Yuri, which drives her to insanity. And finally, she knows how Light's father died because of him, relating to how Natsuki had an abusive father. I really hope that was intentional details, because if not, I'm going to sound so stupid. But if it is, it's very clever yet subtle. Sadly, the rest of the verse is just to me. She raps fast. I couldn't tell you a single thing she says besides the word kitties or teens. That's all that I remember. And the last few lines are fine, but they kind of go in one ear and out the other for me. This is only 20 seconds of rapping somehow, but it feels much longer to me, and it just doesn't hold my attention as much as the rest. That's why I have one major gripe with the battle. The other 200 seconds are very engaging and impressive. Ultimately, the real reason this massive story-based project can't go above 13th place is that the replay value is the lowest of anything in the top 15. It's just not a fun battle to revisit, and it's not as accessible as other AVAs due to the length and the focus on a story, rather than the fun vibe or atmosphere. As a rap battle, it's not that catchy, and the replay value is when you're specifically going back for details, which can be good for fans of the series, but outside of that, and maybe if you're ranking every AVA or something, there's not a whole lot of other reason to go back to it. But if this is your number one, heck, if it's the objective number one, I understand, but objectivity is not a factor in my rankings, and I can't put it above the other battles I like a lot more, because this one I like, but I more respect it than love it. Number 12, the Duck Song versus the Untitled Goose Game. Now this is an April Fool's battle. Derpy had some good jokes and it stood on its own as a solid project, but this battle's running gag about the goose is not only funnier but a better fit for the holiday. So to elaborate, the goose acts realistically annoying by constantly making jokes about the duck's mom. With how many there are, it's understandable that some of these are not that funny. However, I think nearly all of the jokes, and all the ones in the first verse at least, are hilarious. The opening scheme is kind of crazy, and then later on the Stupendium says, back to your mama. It's an all-time great delivery that I could not replicate, I'm so sorry. And I've got your mom on my to-do list is just a very funny line. On that note, the Stupendium voices the goose. And I can understand if somebody would be afraid that they would not perform as well as they would on their main channel on this small rap battle channel. But fortunately, Eddie directs the vocals well, and Stupendium provides incredibly smooth flow and fittingly over-the-top flair to the punchlines. The April Fool's joke's a pretty major part of what makes this battle stand out, but there's a lot more merit here. I always found the intro referencing the Duck song very fun, and the way he opens with, "Hey," is fun. In terms of the Duck's performance, Eddie does a very good job. He actually sounds quite a lot like the Duck, but there's a very distinct attitude, and it adds to that characterization. And the writing is good as well. Some lines are supposed to be really harsh or funny, but aren't that effective, such as, "Biting off Ghost Simulator doesn't make you goated," and "They printed me on paperback and I still made my paper back." I think those lines are fine, but they're just kind of puns that anyone else could have come up with, and they'd be in a Chapter 1 battle if they could have been. Fortunately, there are a lot of great lines here, even independent of the performance. Some basic lines feel more interesting with the way he says stuff, though. Like, "Then his players waddle away till the very next game." It's very good. And "Bro, you bombed," and "Call this battle the Swan Song," aided by the performance, but even on their own, they're very laugh-out-loud funny. It's hard to explain what makes some jokes work and others don't, but there is a science to good jokes, and some of these just hit hard and some of them don't. It's kind of hard to explain, but that is the way it is with this. I should also note, the goose has one or two genuinely good lines outside of the main joke, like, "You don't take silver, you're repping copper." A very fun diss, referencing how copper is often the third thing in a ranking system after silver. Technically, it's usually bronze, but bronze is an alloy of copper, so it certainly works. Then, "I take it you want grapes because all you're doing is wine," is a very funny pun on wine. That's pretty much all I have to say about the writing. For every line that's kind of there are 4 memorable lines that are either really funny or just really well written. One of the best ratios I've mentioned so far. That said, I doubt this seems more impressive than Light vs. Monica, and in truth, that is the case. This battle's writing does not hold up as well, and there was almost definitely more effort put into that aspect of Light vs. Monica, even just individual lines. However, I keep coming back to this one. It is a super catchy beat to service the great performances, and the video is full of different editing and animation styles that all look great. It's a colorful and vibrant video, and it's very clean, honestly, the whole way through. It's the best video I've discussed so far, and it fits the vibe of an April Fool's battle because it's serious in terms of the production, but it's also very humorous. The unique ideas and stronger production do help it stand above Derpy Hooves, as it not only improves the project in that regard, but does make it more memorable. And this also allows it to feel more distinct from other rap battle series. It might be a bit early to say this, but I think very few other creators could have made this battle or done this matchup as well. The characterization of the goose is among the funniest material in the whole series, and the strong points in every other aspect of the battle make it very spectacular, and we're not even at the top 10 yet. Number 11 is Denji vs. Wolverine. The list gets even harder right here, because I love this battle. Ordering is hard. I don't know Chainsaw Man very well, and Wolverine's a character I know, but haven't seen much material of. That said, I find this absolutely stacked with memorable lines. More so than quite a few battles above it even. This is the elements I love most. Things like Denji saying Wolverine picked the only phoenix that couldn't resurrect, the X-Man and X-Man wordplay, the bride and groom wordplay, the line, "You've got retractable bones, has your pull-out game so weak," skeleton in your closet, the closer, and especially the consequence for Aki cuts an arm and a leg and an arm and a leg and a body. They're all top tier. The sheer quantity of harsh disses and clever puns makes this one a battle I love going back to, even with a lack of interest in the characters, especially Denji. I should also discuss the rhyme schemes, as they are definitely among the cleanest in any battle I've mentioned so far, but they do tie into a weaker aspect of the battle. The best schemes are great, like Denji's "Act like your backstory was so serious, howl at a sad boy who was so feverish" being a prime example of a good one, but Wolverine's faster part is not as successful. It's a mix of writing and vocals again. And the faster parts have things like, don't go pretending you paid off your debt. Forget being wealthy. You ate all your bread. And in that Wolverine voice, it sounds slightly weird, and they never seem as smooth as the rest of the battle. Also, some parts have some odd emphasis, because actually the line, Reppin' X-Men and Weapon X, I did not know the word Reppin' was being said at all until literally just now as I write the script. And I've seen this battle a lot. It's written solidly, but not as clean as most other 2023 AVA schemes, and I can kind of feel my mind start to check out in this part of the battle. It's a small feeling, but I know when it happens. In between the arm and a leg line and the closer, the only thing I'm really enjoying in the verse is the video. That note, the video is definitely not as strong as the previous two battles I've discussed. The first two verses feel kind of rushed and lack creativity, especially when it shows old Wolverine animation. The art goes crazy here, but it does kind of just show up in front of a background, move around a little with some basic transitions, that's it. The comic editing of the later verses by Stir Rap Battles is more interesting, and the AMV is also a lot more stylized here. Those first two verses are definitely below average for animation versus anything videos. As far as later ones go, in terms of Chapter 1, it's way above those. But anyway, I've been pretty harsh here, so you're maybe surprised this ranks so high, but it's really that writing that boosted for me. When I watch the battle, I can appreciate the video, sound, and everything else, but it's usually the lines that stick with me in any battle. If I'm talking with someone, I'm gonna be like, remember how good that one line is, as opposed to remember how well mixed that battle was? And this battle is loaded with good lines I love talking about. And as a result, this is a battle that's hard to forget, and I think as I learn more about the characters, I'm only going to appreciate it more. Number 10, Blitz vs. Pico. Starting the top 10, one side here is overall more well executed than the other. Pico is not a character I know a ton about, but the characterization is super interesting. His verses sound like real rap songs, and the schemes are among the cleanest in any battle. With phenomenal vocals from the Kevin Bennett, it's hard not to get hyped when he says, when I make that AK pop. So the rhymes are excellent. I was just mentioning how important good individual lines are, though. So, does this battle have any? Yes. The turning heads joke about Blitzo's one night with some owl creature, I assume that's what goes on, that's a good pun. And the Blitzophrenia line is also a very good lead-in to Blitz's verse. Then the second verse has 4 bars referencing Eminem, far more effectively than Rap Gourd from Jack Skellington. I don't have much to get into with this verse specifically, but it is near perfect lyrically, with the performance getting super energetic, and the lines being among Eddie's best. Pico verse 2 is simply fantastic. The Blitz side has more flaws. I don't know much about Vizzy Pop, I said, but I still have to remind myself that Blitz is not pronounced Blitzo, and that tells you how much I know. These verses are at least solid in every area, but they're not really that great in any of them. Visually, these verses are a small step up from the Wolverine ones I mentioned, with decent AMV that ultimately feels kinda disconnected from the battle, because in many clips, he's clearly talking to another character, and that's kind of weird. Still well edited, but just not that interesting. They are kinda boring to look at, but fortunately there's more to enjoy in these verses. The Blitz performance is good. It's a little more flawed than Pico, it was Rect's first rap battle role, and the biggest issue is that after seeing a little Vizzy Pop stuff, the voice is good, but a bit forced and not quite a spot-on impression. That's a minor thing, and it still feels a lot like Blitz to the point where if you heard the lines without subtitles, you'd probably know who was talking. That's partially because of how in character they are, though, and that's another sort of issue. Most of the lines are incredibly vulgar, and while some of the lines are hilarious, like, not even your A's are straight, some of them are not funny to me, and they're just not my cup of tea. They simply don't work because, in actual Vizzy Pop stuff, I certainly don't laugh at every joke, and some of these are that kind of joke. To compare it to another related battle, Has Been Hotel vs. Hotel Mario had far less of this type of thing for Angel Dust. So while Eddie's battle is more faithful, I'm just not the target audience for most of those jokes. Blitz's verses are still very good thanks to great deliveries and individual lines, but they aren't really top 10 worthy on their own. Pico's side helps elevate the battle's placement, even if I didn't have as much to say overall with this battle. Number 9, Shaggy vs. Crazy Dave. I have loved this battle for a very, very long time, and if you asked me a few months ago where this ranked, I'm sure I'd say top 5. Unfortunately, it's grown off of me a bit, as I realize it's simply not as polished as some of the biggest projects that were made after it. There are moments here I still love more than most in the series. The whole first verse from Dave is a blast. The only thing I don't like is the "Think Your Heroes" ad-lib being the same volume as the main line, and it kind of sounds like it was done in the same take. It's just very weird. It's all, think your heroes, but it feels off, especially since the "is a zero" ad-lib that comes after it is much quieter. However, the rest of this verse is awesome. The opening scheme is really catchy and technical. It's full of fun visuals like a zombie holding a speech bubble. This is a more successful combination of regular subtitles and visuals than Megumin. The individual lines are also great, like, "This neighbor ain't spitting peas," and "You're safe from the zombies because brains are something you lack." Simple, but very funny. I think knowing the characters does definitely help here. I chuckle at some of the more basic lines than I did in other battles. There's much more to this verse that I think is really great, honestly. It's not just simple lines. The fast flow is really solid. It's not the most impressive technical fast rap, but it's still thoroughly enjoyable. The way the beat hits start at the start of each fast segment is beautiful, and Freshie Canal delivers the line super well, given how high speed and wacky the voice has to be. And on that note, Freshie Canal does a great job as Crazy Dave. In fact, it's crazy good, with a great mix of the sounds being like the actual mumbling he makes, but also being what you'd expect him to be if he raps. The casting was awesome here. Dave's verse also has the couplet, "I've been known to help lazy neighbors in my town, but right now I'm putting this couch potato in the ground like spadow." It's accessible for those who don't know what Dave does, but it hits harder when you know about spadow. And I say spadow every time I'm actually watching the battle. It's just such an enjoyable line. The other section I especially love is the first 4 lines of Shaggy's first verse. All of the lines are fun. Opening with, "Zoinks, you're the largest ghoul I've ever seen," having 2 fun characterization moments for Shaggy with him saying zoinks and stuttering, while also being a funny comparison calling Dave a ghoul. Then the next line, "I love the chow, but dude, even the zombies eat their greens," continues the physique jokes in a pretty clever way. And then, "You should time travel to when your games actually had some meat," keeps that joke coming, but adds in the diss about the declining quality of PvZ, and that finally transitions into, "Like your appetite's so greedy, you've got EA to a T," which is one of my favorite lines in the whole series. It's a really good pun with strong delivery, completing a solid rhyme scheme and section of disses, and leading into the beat drop very nicely. Admittedly, there's not too much after this that's great. I think Dave has a few more funny lines in the second verse, and the beat and animation stay very good the whole way through, but the flaws become more obvious from here on out. First thing I will note is about the Shaggy performance. Michael Malconian not only has a really cool last name, but also provides some very fun deliveries in the first 4 lines. But after that, you realize the voice is a bit too high-pitched for Shaggy, and it doesn't really sound that much like him. Once the writing is just saying stuff, and it's not really written to be spoken by the character Shaggy, it feels kind of except for when he stretches the syllable to go more high-pitched. Besides those moments, like direct to PvZ, it's flawed. The other thing is that Malconian's flowing is a little wonky in some parts of the second verse, such as, "I'm looking like a Scooby snack fit in these jeans," and "No ladies ever loved you because you're as big as the Mystery Machine." The last verse is just kind of in general. Another thing to note is that the video is not really top tier like I used to think. It has the fun concept of featuring custom art for every single plant from the PvZ franchise, which I like. And even though it's just labor-intensive Easter eggs, it was an interesting concept. It may not have paid off for the casual viewers, and it's not a huge flaw of the video, I just wanted to note that factoid. One area where it causes flaws is some shots having so many plants and others having none, and those feel kind of bare bones. My bigger issue with the video is admitting that BMB's animation is fun, but definitely not as strong as his later efforts. It makes sense he would improve with time, and this was one of the first battles he animated for. The lip syncing is a little more off, and the movements are a bit more stilted with very little of the body moving at one time, but it's still very good. In terms of editing, I find the use of the abstract blue-green background in Shaggy's first verse weird, and the use of color trails is bizarre to me. I don't think they look that good, and the motions they were used for seem kind of unnatural in a not good way. Most of the videos for Animation vs. Anything overall got better as the artists and editors honed their craft, and it's still a good one, but I'll leave it at that. Much of this battle doesn't really hold up, and it is more amateur than I used to think, but honestly, it's still so much fun to me. A lot of the battle I really love, and I don't think the rest of that battle will ever get old. It's definitely more flawed than at least one of the battles below it, probably a few, but I still go back to this one again and again. Number 8 is Salad Fingers versus the Marionette. By far the highest ranked Chapter 1 battle. This is the main reason why I included Chapter 1 at all. The other reason is that making a full ranking of the series sounds more impressive than one season, but also I couldn't imagine ranking AVA without this. It's a massive jump in quality from every battle that preceded it. To get the main issue out of the way, the video is definitely the most Chapter 1 aspect of this battle. It is fun art and 3D animation, but there are definitely parts of this animation that look a little weird, and the bigger thing is how the shot composition and editing is much more flawed than maybe every video that followed it. I'll show some of the weirder shots on the screen as I talk for a little bit, but use some bland looking things, odd transitions, and it's clear that this is one aspect that doesn't hold up. What really works, though, is how well the audio and writing blend together. I have only seen 1 or 2 Salad Fingers episodes, but the first verse is incredible. From the opening, "Hello," Gaming Plush 64's voice is very close to the original. And it's so chilling and off-putting, perfect for the nature of the character. The first scheme is solid, but I've always loved the following with, "You're not scary, you're special, Scott is more scared of his perilous schedule." It's pretty fast, but not lyrical miracle speed, so it really hooks me. Not to mention, the disses in this scheme are just solid and easy to pick up on. Following this, Salad Fingers just sighs for a moment, providing a very well-placed pause, and also some chills down some spines maybe. The next scheme is also fast and hooks me again, but this part has the beat escalating with a drop happening right as he says, "It's awful." The next scheme just goes so hard, even as it slows down, concluding with a really hard line with baiting out the night guard like a Jeremy Fisher, and I think the ad-lib where Salad Fingers repeats, "Jeremy Fisher," honestly goes so hard, and it's one of my favorite ad-libs in any battle. There's a big enough pause between schemes for the ad-lib to work perfectly, and then we get the final scheme of the verse. It starts with, "On first impression, honestly, I'm not that threatened." The only substance here is Salad Fingers saying he's not intimidated, but the first impression pun is very funny, and the rhyme is so clean. And so continues the scheme, ending with, "He left his audience guessing and let you rot in suspension," as a clever final diss with sinister wordplay. This entire verse is one of the best in the whole series. I get completely sucked into the atmospheric tone, haunting performance, and beautiful writing. The rest of the battle is pretty much just as good. Nearly every rhyme scheme is as clean as the later Chapter 2 AVAs, such as rhyming head and limbs, skeleton, residence, and finally, bite of 87 did. On top of this, there are tons of well-written individual lines, such as "The sands of time will smooth out all the horrors of Glass Brother," and "Your wrapping's rusty, for once I hope it doesn't rub off on me," that are pretty easy to pick up on, while just being very good disses and references. The audio is incredibly slick, thanks to having the 2 best performances in Chapter 1, and a beat that's so good, it's probably the main reason I used a bunch of Anyway Well beats last year. I'm not sure what else to say. It's simply one of the best Halloween rap battles of all time, with so many all-time great rhyme schemes and all-time great verse. The video is not as professional as the top 7, but I said the most important battle aspect is writing, and this delivers. Mind you, I noted that good lines are what I value the most, but these schemes are simply so excellent that even if a few battles below this had a few more punchlines I like more, I couldn't put this any lower. It's truly astounding how well the writing holds up, and the audio is the same. Nearly 4 years after it was released, it's incredible. Number 7 is Toothless vs. Pikachu. Right off the bat, I have seen all How to Train Your Dragon movies, so I actually have some insight on how well one side was represented. One key thing to discuss with this battle is how the matchup seems pretty tough to pull off, but Eddie made some good decisions that led to this being probably the best case scenario for this mashup. First issue to discuss is Toothless's voice. How do you do that in the battle? Toothless doesn't have a speaking voice, so you gotta choose your own. Do you do a deep, growly monster voice? Well, no. He's a very gentle character. The voice of Kumodo Dragon is still very confident and booming, but it fits Toothless pretty well and never gets overly dragon-like. I think it's an excellent performance as a result. Another issue is using Pikachu in a battle. If you make a battle with an obscure Pokemon nobody cares about, like Necrozma, Sableye, Shedinja, Poltegeist, Watchog, or Runerigus, you expect the writing to focus on that individual Pokemon and its abilities. But Pikachu's the face of Pokemon. There's a lot to cover, so to write strong lyrics that appeal to both fans and those who don't know the franchise well, it's tough. But I think it was pulled off very well, especially in Toothless's final verse. There's not a lot of puns and wordplay, but this verse has some insane digs against really serious stuff against Pokemon. It's actually kind of crazy how intense the lyrics and performance get, and it feels like the sort of thing you'd see in a Season 2 ERB only, because of how unhinged it is. It's only further aided by gorgeous animation, with the drawing of the Alpha Dragon being one of my favorite designs BMB has ever made. Some have critiqued this verse because the closer is not as hard as the subject matter from the rest of the verse, but since the performance and beat keep that intensity, I think the transition is good, and it allows the following line from Pikachu to make more sense. Because, honestly, it would have been really weird if Toothless said, "Kids die choking on your toys," and Pikachu immediately says, "Yeah, but I sold a lot of them." I realize that there are still things with the tonal shift that people won't like in the save battery line, but it's really not that big a deal for me. It kind of feels like anyone who's genuinely bothered by that might have been looking for reasons to critique the battle, but then again, that's what I'm doing here, and I complained about bronze being an alloy of copper. So, what do I know? All in all, this is most definitely my favorite verse in the battle. Admittedly, I think this is kind of by a big margin, so there's not a ton to say about the other verses, but there's not a lot of problems in them. There's small things here and there I don't like, such as 2 puns on the word toothless. The first one being with that verse was toothless, all Burke and no bite. That one was great, and it's infinitely better than the second one, so I don't like the inclusion of that second one. Ultimately, I don't have a ton of super insightful stuff to say about the other verses. They seem to mostly be focused on individual punches rather than crazy schemes, and I like that style for these characters because there's a lot of material. Some lines are even improved versions of previous AVA ones. In Kyoko there's a line, "A handheld game is an accurate description," and here we get the line, "Players boot up their handheld and get their handheld," as a much stronger wording of the same punch. So some lines are good, a few are not. I think the video is the best one I've discussed so far. I not only love the animation, but also the storyboarding, with scenes like flying, Toothless, and Charizard. It's super strong. One thing that is generally not amazing is Chi-Chi's performance as Pikachu. The voice is very good, and it's strong, but it's almost definitely the weakest performance of the top 7. Some lines could have used re-recording. Many parts, like when she yells or ad-libs, are top tier, but the way she says some lines, such as "dragging my name through the dirt," and "this is charge, I'm sealing your thunder with one shock," feel like they were not wrapped in the meter they were supposed to, or just had some odd emphasis. But all in all, this battle is consistently fun the whole way through, and any minor shortcoming like that only knocks it down by a tiny bit, and therefore, it made the top 7. Number 6 is Tricky vs. Springtrap. When attempting a critical analysis of this battle without getting into what I personally enjoy or don't, I struggle to say anything bad. This is just a super intense battle with every aspect of the project fitting that unique atmosphere. I know a few battles that go for similar vibes, but none are as good as this one. What works best here is the way the battle sounds. Right from the intro, Eddie gets really into it as the announcer, and this is my favorite intro as a result. The instrumental immediately ramps up, and on that note, the instrumental is super intense. And the mix is not perfectly clean, it sounds somewhat distorted and rough, and I think that adds to the unhinged nature of the audio. This really ties the vibe together, but the most important aspect here is the performances. Peso Pete's typical sound is a phenomenal fit for Tricky the Clown, in terms of the loud aggression, and the way he was written here, I don't know if the character's like that for sure, is great for Tricky in this trap metal setting. It's the way Peso Pete screams these lines that makes them stand out. It all just comes together really well, and the same can be said for Springtrap. I mean, he's not screaming, he's not giving fast rap. Instead, he's characterized as still aggressive, but very reserved and composed. And it's a still sinister voice that I love. The Monarchy is the voice actor here, and I would definitely call this their best performance in any rap battle. And both of these performances are contenders for the best in the series. On top of this, the video is once again strongest I've talked about so far. The 3D animation from Gaming Plush 64 is stunningly gorgeous, and I love the different designs, especially where you have the spring Bonnie suit where you can see Afton's eyes and face through the suit if you look closely. And then on the Tricky side, Valeni's art for Tricky stills and BMB's animation style for the Madness combat parts are matches made in heaven, and this side looks incredible as a result of that, plus the crazy editing from Eddie himself. You have flashes of light, gory imagery, beautiful typography on some lines, and it's all so immersive, honestly, while striking a contrast to the Springtrap editing that chooses to have less flashes and flare and let the animation speak for itself. Distinct sides, but they flow nicely together. I imagine this all sounds pretty top 3 right now, but there are some personal gripes I have when I'm actively watching the battle. The main one is that I just don't get into Tricky verse 2. I don't really remember any of the lines besides Sit and Survive because I got the improbability drive, which is a very good rhyme. Every compliment I gave earlier applies to the verse, but I just don't personally get into the fast rap as much here. The first verse has more memorable material within the schemes, and I just think those schemes sounded better overall. Another smaller gripe is that Springtrap's first verse ends with a line that doesn't have that much of a clever spin on it, but it is still a good solid comparison, and the visual pair with it works super well, after I learned the context of those ghost children in FNAF. I should note I didn't know either character at all. That is one really tiny nitpick I had, and it used to get me when I knew less about the character. But overall, the Springtrap side is pretty much flawless besides that. There are many great lines and schemes I didn't mention, but I just wanted to get the performance out of the way because that is the part that sticks out the most as truly S-tier animation versus anything. The Tricky side is pretty close in quality, but I just don't personally get into that style of the second verse all that much, and that is a quarter of the battle. That one quarter keeps it out of an even higher spot, but there is no doubt this is one of the most cohesive and impressive projects Eddie and his team have ever pulled off. Number 5 is Salad Fingers versus the Marionette Reanimated. The first and currently only remaster of an AVA so far, I thought Salad Fingers was an interesting choice to remake, because even though there are production aspects that could be easily improved from Chapter 1, the same applies to every other Chapter 1 battle, and this is the only Chapter 1 battle with writing I think is up to snuff with later Chapter 2. I would have thought Eddie would remake something with more room for improvement in lyrics, like Jack vs. Sans. But based on the lyrics staying largely the same, I can understand that's not what he was trying to do, and he mentioned in a recent interview with Just Gamer that if he does more reanimateds, he might go the route of changing the content of the lyrics more. And I look forward to that if he does. Anyway, this reanimated episode has aspects that I like more than the original, but also some I like less. The first big change here is performances, because even though the same voice actors reprise their roles, unfortunately, it is clear that Gaming Plush could not pull off the same voice he did 3 years ago. This performance, it is better directed than the original, and some segments, such as the whole "not often that greed will turn a Christian to a comment to shoppers," that sounds better. But overall, I find the original performance more chilling, and it's unfortunate. I know this is probably the best performance we could have gotten with this reanimated concept and bringing back the same VAs, but I prefer the original voice, and it makes a pretty big difference here. Ozzy's performance overall shows great improvement over the original. She provides a quieter, more sinister voice that still gets rough and aggressive at the right moments. I also love the way her rap is super fast in the last verse, but it's harmonized, and it sounds wonderful. The one segment I don't like is in the first verse. There's the sort of fast section after "I'm killing the mic" with a super loud screaming in the background and crazy build-up, but then the fast part is delivered really robotically. It's kind of unfortunate because It's really anticlimactic when there's such build-up, and the rest of the performance is super expressive. But then this segment is, I'm hopping out the box and crawling down the halls, a monster on the prowl. It's just a little I'm not huge on that decision. I guess it is better directed than the original version of the scheme, but I don't like the direction it took. I wish the more sinister and expressive voice carried through there. But all in all, I think performances kind of even out with the original, because Marionette improved by a larger margin than Salad Fingers downgraded, so maybe a slight improvement overall. And still, both performances are certainly worthy of top 5, but Tricky vs. Springtrap is better in that regard. In terms of writing, you already know I love the original, and some word changes here or slightly different flows are improvements overall. The original line, girl yell like Afton so that this kid cannot spring her trap, was a bit awkward with the whole that emphasis, so changing it to girl yell like Afton, I'll stop this kid from springing her trap, not only aided that but also added a syllable to the rhyme, which is nice. The same happens to the line, now a flush boy is all that loves ya, becoming now a flush boy is your last loved one. Small changes, but they all in all improve the already top tier writing. So this doesn't seem like a huge jump, but there is one aspect that sealed a top 5 spot. The video. Gaming Plush animates both sides of the battle, with gorgeous but creepy animation for Salad Fingers, and smooth and vibrant 3D animation for Marionette. So the individual visuals here, they're all super memorable, things like the Bite of 87 one, and I'm comfortable calling this the best video in the series. There are such great scenes with the FNAF animatronics appearing and disappearing into the shadows, and some gory looking imagery on the Salad Fingers side. On top of all this, the lighting, camera movements, and transitions are some of the most beautiful and creative in any battle. I'm no expert on that sort of thing, but just looking at the changes between scenes has me hooked. So all in all, you have the excellent writing and audio that got the original into the top 10, coupled with a top 1 video. So it is clearly an extremely high tier project. Number 4, Grunkle Stan vs. Saul Goodman. This battle did not earn a high spot because of wild ambitions. There's no crazy fast rap, the beat isn't anything grand, the video doesn't have animation like the last few have discussed, and it all in all feels like a bit of a smaller scale project. It still has the same great production value, but what it may lack in obvious ambition, it makes up for by being creative in its own way and very, very fun. In terms of the writing, this is probably the best battle to discuss how Eddie has mastered the skill of making seemingly simple lyrics memorable. You certainly have some incredibly clever disses here, like you filled up room in his head until his head filled your room, and looks like you're gaslighting led to his gaslighting, but these are balanced out with hilarious in-character moments. Perhaps the best example is when Stan says, I'll turn my golf cart around and bash you again, then I'll turn my golf cart around and bash you again, then I'll turn my golf cart around and bash you again. He takes 3 lines to say the same thing, over and over, but it works, because I know that Stan is a pretty petty character who probably would do that if he actually met Saul in real life, or in Gravity Falls life, you get the point. The sacrifice of 3 lines that could have been more traditional disses, it was a worthy one, because it provided a clean, well thought out joke that might be the most quoted line in the battle overall. For me personally, the funniest line is actually in the second verse from Stan. After Saul calls him fishy, his response is, dude, you work with ermine trout and your name is McGill. That is so incredibly stupid, and it's exactly the kind of joke Stan would make. A pun on the fact that the guy's last name kinda has trout in it, and trout is a fish. I don't know how Eddie came up with that. It's really silly, but it's also utter genius in the rap battle. In terms of AVA lines, this might be in my top 5 of all time. These memorable character-focused jokes really help this stand out from even most other great Chapter 2 battles. It shows the direction Eddie's series is headed. I also want to mention that the latter half of Saul's first verse is awesome. It's the best example of how even though the battle's audio doesn't have a grand or intense instrumental, it's still incredibly clean and catchy. I adore the flow of, what can I say, I made my company name without laboring my grandkids in the summer all day, and couple that with a distinct and dynamic editing from Cyancoat, and the very fitting vocal performance from Freest, and you have a great couplet that doesn't throw in any puns, and just lets the catchy writing and audio speak for itself. I just mentioned one performance and I'll briefly touch on that. So Dennis Likes Jazz is not only an excellent impressionist stan, but also has great direction that leads to great emphasis being put on some of the best jokes that I was mentioning. And for visuals, I do not know too much about Better Call Saul, but the effect that makes Saul look like he's in front of a green screen in reference to the commercial that I have seen is a very fun detail. Even in the title cards, the characters' names glitch to show their real names for a brief moment. Clearly there's so much passion in each detail, and I'm sure these characters were ones Eddie really loved, and most likely other people on the team really wanted to do justice. I'd say they succeeded, making a relatively small battle that manages to stand out over most of the larger projects in nearly every way. Number 3, Blue versus Monokuma. Kicking off top 3 is the oldest battle we've discussed in a while. This is another example of a simple one, kind of. I don't think it's especially mind-blowing in ambition or anything. It seems like one where Eddie just wanted to use the characters and have fun, and fortunately, it is very, very fun. I learned about Danganronpa's existence through rap battles, but Blue's Clues is a series I actually know a lot about. I grew up with it, so naturally that's the side I prefer. I think it's one of the strongest characters in any AVA, frankly. Jesse Box VO gives my personal favorite performance in the whole series. You have great ad-libs that sound exactly like Blue, and so many of these deliveries are just pure joy. The way she says, Blue Skidoo, it makes me smile every time. I think that Blue characterization is just very good. It has the fun and playful demeanor, but there's still swear words being used, and it doesn't feel out of place, honestly. It's just a fun, well-handled performance and characterization. Snakebite126 as Monokuma is also very good. He keeps the flow very well, and the deliveries are also well directed. But it doesn't feel as strong as the Blue side just because Monokuma has weaker writing. Certain parts kind of feel like they belong in a 2021 battle, the most obvious being, this bears despair to spare, this pair's disparities barely fair. It's well written, it's kind of cute I guess, but I think the whole concept is a bit too gimmicky and try hard without really paying off. Usually when I quote the line, I just make fun of it by saying, despair, 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 you get the idea. Another example is the closer being a very simple punishment time joke in the first verse, but not being quite as smart as some of the other simple lines I've been praising in things like Stan vs. Saul. Fortunately, most of this writing is great. Some simple lines like, Monokuma, our students don't have a lot in common. For one, mine probably know what an octagon is, are super funny to me. Some of these work incredibly well. Monokuma also packs in some much stronger lines, and they may feel try-hard in a way, but they're very successful overall. The whole Burns left in the first degree, like when Burns left for his first degree, that's not the exact quote, but that pun, that paid off. I love that. And Blue has a version of that of her own, with killing the beat, now it's black and blue, killing the beat, now I'm black and blue. I think that's phenomenal. Even some simple lines, such as I've got the discovered, referencing a body's been discovered, are not only clever enough, but they also just sound fantastic in these performances. And the next note is just that this is a super fun listen. On top of those voices, the beat is super jazzy, and the switches and flows are all incredibly effective, even with the despair one. It very naturally goes from one to the next, and that is great. Most of the rhyme schemes are not crazy, lyrical miracle stuff, but they're very catchy and incredibly clean in the sound, making this a very short battle, but a super fun one and accessible for pretty much anyone who just wants to listen without knowing the characters. Another very engaging aspect is the video. Monokuma's side, it is mostly just PNG editing, but I think it's very well done PNG editing. It all looks great, with some of these transitions using the black and white color palette being very clever. Blue is an even stronger video, with wonderful animation from Robot Richie. It's so much fun to not only see Blue replicated, but cute details like flowers and trees moving to the beat in the first scene, and a bunch of Danganronpa characters being animated in the Blue's Clues style. The battle's extremely fun, but my description probably makes it clear that Saul is a cleaner and technically better made project. And yes, I heavily debated whether this would get third place or that. But there is one thing I've not mentioned yet. I'm not sure this was obvious throughout the ranking or not, but for battles I saw when they came out and before I really got into making battles, the rankings were kind of all over the place. This mainly happens with late 2021 and most 2022 battles. For example, it was hard to put Shaggy vs. Dave as low as I did, or even put Blitz vs. Pico in the top 10. Because not long ago, Dave would have been top 5, Pico would have probably been top 15 or bottom half. This one did not move down at all. I mentioned in a past ranking that there are some fan-made battles that were the most important in inspiring me to make my own series, and I'd say this is definitely in that top 10. I was not hooked on AVA entirely before this came out, but when this dropped, I loved the characterization of the childhood hero of mine. It was so unique and fun, and the catchy nature of the battle was something I appreciated back then, and even more now. I think some battles below this one definitely are more technically proficient, especially in the writing, but I don't really care. I love this one, always have and always will. That's really all there is to it. It still feels unique to Eddie, and it allowed me to appreciate his character-focused battles a lot more than I used to. Number 2, Rick Sanchez vs. GLaDOS. For many, this is probably not top 2. Some things have maybe not aged super well, and there are some common complaints. Things like the Wheatley inclusion. As someone who has little knowledge of these characters and their dynamics, outside of some Rick and Morty memes, especially for Portal though, it's not a big issue for me. When I watch this battle, there aren't really any major things that bother me. I definitely don't think every scene's mind-blowing visually, or that every line's comedy gold, but the high points this battle reaches are probably the highest in the series for me. GLaDOS is given super clean writing with incredible lines that I think are some of the harshest in any AVA. Things like, it's not like you still have a wife to protect. You don't have to know Rick and Morty to understand that diss and be shocked by how harsh it is. Other lines such as, your fanbase somehow managed to pack on a few hundred pounds, are just really funny and also solid disses. This side is also aided by a very good performance from Nicole Smith. She sounds like GLaDOS, but also has small hints of emotion put into certain lines, and I think they add up to a chilling performance that's not entirely robotic, thanks to those subtle changes adding to the chilling nature. The visuals on this side are certainly also of note. Gaming Plush once again makes beautiful 3D animation, but also mixes it in with well-placed AMV. I think the AMV parts are actually really creative and well edited, but the parts of the actual laboratory are especially atmospheric and add to the chillingness of this side of the battle. I especially like how the camera's moving switches. There's really fast parts where there's a clap in the beat and it just kind of janky, jolty moves, and then there's slower parts where you're allowed to just kind of soak in the atmosphere for the low-key parts of the beat. I like that. On the note of the video, all in all, it is my second favorite in the series, and this is the weaker half. Rick Sanchez has incredible art and editing from Cyancoat. The art does not replicate the Rick and Morty style, but it works, and the fact it's so distinct from the original, but still feels like the character, makes it some of the best art in any rap battle. In the first verse, the animation is serviced by fun typography and some beautiful transitions. I like the background on this side. It works well as a setting, and the portals being incorporated makes it feel grander than it is. Only when I'm pausing a battle, which I do for rankings like this a lot, is when I appreciate a background, but that's a sign of a good background because it blends in well, and this is one of my favorites. This verse is great, but the second verse puts it to shame. The chemistry between Rick and Morty is very true to the show, and from what I know about it, it is about as perfect as it could have been. It's hilarious and leads into Rick Sanchez raps Eminem Godzilla. This is particularly interesting because he actually raps the fast part of Rap God. That was a big blunder, I'm just kidding, that was obviously on purpose. But this part is awesome because the beat hits perfectly work with the flow, Morty vibing is a great visual, and the new lyrics are a great way to recontextualize Rap God, and they are just hilarious. The line, I was in a pickle and I wasn't in a pickle, is one of my favorites. Following this, Rick and Morty travel at different dimensions, each done by a different animator, which is awesome to see. I like the references of previous rap battles in all the scenes, and all the animators do a phenomenal job. The lines here are not necessarily crazy disses, but they continue the trend of being super funny, and once Rick is back in his main dimension, you have some of the strongest lines in the battle to close it out, and this is my favorite verse in the entire series. I was honestly blown away the first time I saw it. I thought it was the best verse in the series at that point, and I still do. That's all I really have to say about this battle. No minor flaw in this is nearly strong enough to counteract just how good the best is for me, and as a result, it almost got number 1. Well, sort of. I kinda knew that number 1 was going to be SpongeBob SquarePants versus Captain Underpants. In most of these discussions, I've had to say, I don't know at least one of the characters very well. This is one of few AVAs where I'm a huge fan of both characters. But even without that knowledge, I imagine this is kind of an unsurprising pick for number 1. A rare occurrence for me, of course. It is the most popular battle in the series. It's been praised by many. It's hard to know what to talk about here, because I'm sure most everything's been said. But I'll start by saying I think this is the most flawless, or at least flawful, of all AVAs so far. In terms of issues, the fish who says my eyes is credited as Fred the fish, when Fred's actually a different color, so that's unlikely to be Fred. That is a big error. But other than that, this has all of the passion and ambition of things like Light versus Monica, but in a more digestible and straight-up fun package. Eddie had little exposure to SpongeBob before making the battle, which makes this all the more impressive. There are so many details here. I feel like he only could have gotten them if he watched a ton of SpongeBob media and did a lot of research. Things like a line mentioning George and Harold from Captain Underpants, while a fish named Harold appears in the background. Or when Patrick's underwear has Goofy Goober design on it, just like in the movie. If Eddie wasn't a SpongeBob expert before making the battle, I imagine he is now. Pretty much every great thing that could be said about this battle has been, but I'll touch on those briefly. But I think I mainly will be discussing details that stick out to me that may not be as widely loved or talked about. So first, let's discuss the video. As a general note, Luke Reardon for SpongeBob and BMB for Captain Underpants were about as perfect as you can get for animation. Their styles are awesome, and the video is simply beautiful to look at. There are some more details in the video I love, like the Rip Pants reference at the end of the first SpongeBob verse. The drawings of the Sponge Out of Water superheroes and then a PNG of a squirrel is hilarious. And even the backgrounds have great details, like Mr. Krup's posters from the original Captain Underpants movie, and the very high prices on the Krusty Krab menu. One final really small detail was the misspelling of the word rubbish on the Fliporama. For those who don't know, George and Harold often misspell words, and it's such a small detail, as many of these are, but it shows how much care everyone put into the project, and I wonder if there's any detail no one's found yet. I'll keep rewatching to find out. Writing and performances are the next thing because they go hand in hand. There's not a single line I would consider bad, or anything even below decent. Some things are small setup lines, which are important to have, and not every seemingly major punch is top tier, but many are. That said, a lot of my favorite lines are not particularly insane in that regard. Many stand out to me because they're delivered well, or they're just super funny. Or both. This battle probably has the perfect blend of writing and voice acting in the series, with the characterizations working super well for each line. SpongeBob has things that work in the traditional sense, like, when it comes to stripping, better stick to the comics. But it's the excellent impression from Luke Reardon, and the great direction for that demeanor, that makes the better stick to the comics part so much fun. On that note, Luke Reardon kills it as SpongeBob. The voice is not easy to nail, but he does it, and it's even more impressive to think he's the same guy who voiced Eggman for me. The Captain Underpants side is my favorite in terms of writing. His verses are top tier, thanks to the mix of clean writing and memorable deliveries I've been highlighting in so many battles. This is clearly not the only battle that makes simple lines the favorites, but I don't think any other battle quite matches this one. The opener for the Captain is literally 3 words, but the way he says, "Stand down, SquarePants," is one of my favorite deliveries in the whole series, and as a result, this might be in my top 3 most quoted lines in the series. However, another line in the Captain Underpants side is top 1. The line, "Under the sea is right, you get an F," is my personal favorite in the entire series. If this was delivered like any random setup line, I think there's a chance I would find it to be the worst line of the battle. It is kind of a dumb pun, but it's like the Ermintrout line, but even better because of the perfect delivery. This is a phenomenal performance from Eddie, showing his growth as a voice actor over the years from roles like Darwin 6 years ago. This fun writing and animation is all tied together with a beautiful audio. All the rhyme schemes are super catchy, and none of them are super fast or anything like that, so it's very easy to just sit back and enjoy without having to replay to understand what people are saying. And then the beat. The main beat is very pleasant. You got nice piano and a calm vibe that fits well. But it gets better because there was a lot of work done on it. On the Captain Underpants side, Eddie incorporated the theme by Weird Al Yankovic into the beat, and he even had the Underpants choir singing along. It makes the battle feel more grand and true to the character. This reaches the peak in the final verse, especially in the last 4 bars. The choir continues, as Underpants gives 4 bars about the late creator of SpongeBob, Steven Hillenburg. The closer is, Nickelodeon died on that hill when Hillenburg died. This might be the most emotional rap battle line for me, as a SpongeBob fan especially. It's a really harsh diss against Nickelodeon not honoring Hillenburg's legacy, but the line is still very respectful toward him. It's not easy to reference this sort of thing in a video like this, but I think this is the best way it could have been handled, while also delivering a top-tier closer. If I haven't made it clear, I think this battle tackles so many ambitious ideas, has so many wonderful details, and feels like a massive project. But the replay value dominates everything else on this list for me. I watched this at least 20 times on the first day it came out, and even over half a year later, when the hype is worn off and I don't even watch battles as regularly, this one is frequently revisited. It nails everything it needed to, being simultaneously mind-blowing and fun. It's like Rick Sanchez verse 2, but for 4 verses. This battle is the best example of how far Eddie has come in my opinion. The first battle still seemed fun to make and have moments I enjoy, but more than any other 2020, 2021, 2022, or even 2023 AVA. This feels like it works on every level and will remain that way for a very long time before it seems dated. For that reason, it is my favorite AVA and my favorite fan-made rap battle, and I will keep watching it over and over again, finding new details and having a good time for quite a while. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down below your list of AVAs or some other fun details you see in battles that I didn't mention. Subscribe for more rankings and rap battles, of course. I'll see you next time.